if I can make sure here. We got the microphone working, testing. Yep, we got that working. I'm on Hangouts on air instead, so that should work a little better. I'm going to pull up the chat on my phone. Let's see what happens here. Okay. I'm in. Hangouts on air instead. It looks like my voice is still deep. I have no idea why my voice sounds so deep. That is really disconcerting. But anyways, I'm here, and that's what's important. And I know that nobody else is here right now because it says there's 0 people in the chat. So I'll just see if anybody turns up. And until that point, I'm just going to continue chatting. And I hope that everything else sounds okay. I'm going to turn this up a little bit. Thank you so much, Grizz. Congratulations on the puberty. I have no idea why my voice sounds so deep, to be honest. Maybe it's cool. Maybe it's how it was meant to sound. Like, maybe this was my voice for radio. The radio gods wanted me to have a deeper voice. Although you can't really call YouTube radio, really. I mean, it's kind of a newer form of radio because anybody can go live at any time, which is kind of fun. By the way, you didn't mess anything up, Grim. We're really looking forward to talking to you on Tuesday, so don't even worry about it. And I went and saw, I wanted to tell everybody, I don't know why, but I just felt like telling everyone, I went and saw the new Avengers movie last night, and it was pretty entertaining, I have to say. I wonder if anyone else has seen it, but it was pretty entertaining, and some parts surprised me, and I had a lot of fun. And I didn't get back until like 1 a.m. We went to a pretty late showing. And I was thinking the whole time I was watching about different Jungian analysis potential in the themes and the symbology of the movie and cultural commentary about where we are right now as a society. And that was really fun to reflect on since I've been reading Jung more and more lately. It's kind of fun to put on that pair of glasses and try to view things from that lens. So I don't know what the heck is going on here with my voice. It's really concerning, but I just thought I'd pop on live and see what happens. I'm not really attached to any specific results. If it goes well, then I'll leave it up. If not, then, I'll just pull it down afterwards. Sometimes you just go live and something good happens. And other times it's a dud. So I have no idea. But let me make sure I can see the chat. Sorry, that was loud. Boom. Have you been through his Red Book? Yeah, I do have Jung's Red Book, and I've looked through it. I haven't really committed myself to reading it fully. It's something that I'm going to do at some point. I just have it. I have the big one, not the little mini version, in my office, and it's kind of sitting up against the wall as sort of an art piece right now. It's a very beautiful book. I flipped through it several times. I love the pictures, the paintings that he made, and it's really brilliant. I mean, I've read some of the passages. That's kind of his most esoteric writing that I've looked at so far. I mean, earlier on in his life, he really maintained himself as a scientist. And I don't think he would have allowed himself to go so far as he did in the Red Book. But I think because he was near the end of his life and he didn't have a lot to lose, he allowed some of the more mystical parts of him to emerge. Hey, Grizz, I have a question. Do you prefer if we call you Grizz or Grim? Because I was calling you Grizz for a while, and then you emailed me and you signed your name Grim, so I started calling you Grim. I really don't mind either way, but if you have a preference. But anyways, Griswald Grim says, I tried once since Peterson said don't start with the Red Book, but the German stalled me. Oh, I see. Yeah, did he say, I know he said be careful with reading Jung. I didn't remember him saying don't read the Red Book. What lecture was that in? Because that's something to look at. If that's the case, I'd like to see that. Also, I'm curious if my voice still sounds really deep and weird, or if it sounds like my normal, high-pitched, silly voice. Okay, we've got Gile Cockrell. Yo, man, what you got to say to a 22-year-old coming off of addiction and learning to budget money properly? Wow, man, I've been there. I got sober when I was young, in my late teens, and well, mid to late teens, and I actually got out of treatment and therapeutic intensive living when I was 18, and I'm very much a part of the sober community. I've been in 12-step communities for years now. I've worked the 12-step programs. I hope the wind doesn't sound too disruptive. I do have a wind muff on, so I think that should uh, help a little bit to mitigate those windy noises. But yeah, so let me think about this for a second. That's a great question. I think that the one thing is, if you're coming off addiction, make sure you have a community of support around you. It's really not ideal to do it alone, especially in the initial phases. You really need, I think 12-step communities are great, whether it's through AA or NA, that's Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous. These are good places to be around, especially in early recovery. I'd say for your first couple years to be really heavily involved with some sort of mindful and intentionally based community is essential, because it will give you something to fall back on your worst days. You know, the power of a community is that even when you're at your weakest moment, you can rely on those who are stronger than you. I still work with people who are in sobriety, and a lot of them typically tend to fall off when the going gets tough. You know, there's the honeymoon phase. Oh, I've been sober for 3 months and it's so great. But as soon as things start to get tough again, they relapse because they don't have the resilience or the support system set up to deal with those moments of weakness. And so it's really essential to have that set up for yourself. So getting a sponsor or a mentor, and it doesn't have to be necessarily through 12-step programs, although I think 12-step programs are one of the most proven methods of recovery from addiction that we have. And even then, a lot of people still can't stay sober. They have a hard time. So if you have that community around you, that's going to really help. And actually, if you feel like answering in the chat, do you have that sort of community? Are you involved with any sort of sober living or sober people around you? Or are you kind of isolated and trying to do this on your own? Because it does matter quite a bit. Now, as far as personal things that you can be doing that aren't related to relying on others, there's a few things. One is, as young people in sobriety, I've found in my experience, just for me, that it's not enough just to be sober just because, right? You imagine when, let's say, when Alcoholics Anonymous was created in the 1920s, 30s, or, a while ago. They created it for alcoholic, typically men, who were broken in their 40s and were at risk of losing everything or had lost everything, their families, their possessions, their careers. These were people who had been beaten up by life. Now, since that time when Alcoholics Anonymous was created, we now have a new era where younger and younger people are getting involved with addiction. And we didn't necessarily lose our families. Some of us did, but we didn't necessarily lose our wives and kids and our possessions. And, we kind of had this rough going early on, but we never had anything. We never really gained anything to lose in the first place. And so our reason for staying sober is a little different. It's not just to keep what we have, right? Like if you're a broken 45-year-old man, in some sense, you just want to see if you can just hold on to the family you have left, or the life that you have left, or the career that you have left, and to see if you can live your life out in peace and serenity. And that's a beautiful thing, and more power to you. But as a young person, I've found for myself that I need something to stay sober for. I'm not just sober just because I don't want to lose more, right? I have a whole life ahead of me. So what is the potential that I'm living into? What is the purpose that I want? What is the career path that I'm pursuing? I'm a little, as as a younger person, I find myself to be a little more ambitious than some of the older people in those recovery environments. So if you can really see, if you can ask yourself the question, okay, I'm sober, and what is it that I'm sober for? Now, some people don't need a big answer to that. Some people, it's like, well, I'm sober so that I can have good relationships, so that I can keep my job, drink a Diet Coke on Sunday night, and get laid. Like, that's fine. That's what Dr. Strachan told me. He was like, Ryan, you need to be careful, because just because you want to have this big purpose doesn't mean everybody else wants to do that. Some people just want to live their simple lives. And he said there's nothing wrong with that. And I absolutely agree with them. So you have to kind of decide what's your motivation for living a sober life. I'm going to read what you said next. Just moved to a no suburb, so getting to know the area. Started seeing a university counselor, so that's about it, really. Okay. Yeah, so depending on your preference, I would check out some 12-step meetings and just see if you can find a sponsor or somebody that can support you, especially if you're really serious about staying sober. And when you say that you're just coming out of addiction, and I don't know what kind of addiction, for all I know, it could be video game addiction, or it could be heroin addiction, or it could be alcoholism. I have no idea what kind of things you're dealing with. But in any case, if you're coming out of an addiction, getting a mentor, somebody that you can call anytime you're struggling, that will try to be there for you and pick up the phone as much as possible, that's really important. Your therapist is great, but that's not enough. Typically, I'm just saying, speaking from experience, typically just seeing a therapist once or twice a week isn't going to be enough to really keep you on the good path that you want to be on. So I would suggest considering what support systems are that you can pursue, and taking that leap of faith. A lot of times people think it's corny or it's cheesy to go to a 12-step meeting, but you know what? Like, it's better to be a little cheesy than to be dead or lose your entire life. So it's kind of like one of those things that even if it's a hard pill to swallow, you swallow it anyway, and you have some humility to try to really get your life on track. So that's kind of what I have to say about that. If you have any follow-up questions, feel free to write them in the chat, because if there's more that you feel like you want addressed, I'd be happy to try to address that for you. Okay, let's see here. Peterson just mentioned that the Red Book was the hardest place to start, but not to read it. Got it. Yeah, that makes sense to me. It would be a hard place to start because it's so esoteric and deeply cryptic. I mean, any Jung is kind of a hard place to start. You know what I mean? Any reading of Jung, like, no matter where you start, it seems to be a little more difficult. But yeah, I guess earlier on in his life, his writing was easier to understand. And it's so fascinating to me how he was Freud's main predecessor, or the guy that was supposed to take over for Freud. And even in his early 20s, like, Freud thought, like, this is basically my son that's going to rise up and sit on the throne and carry on my legacy. And then Jung went off to he left Freud, and they had this whole dramatic falling out. And, I read some of their letters back and forth, and they were, extremely tense, and things got pretty messy towards the end. But you get this sense, if you read the historical memoirs and you read the letters, you get the sense that there's this destiny for these men to come into their own greatness and pass down these legacies. And it was almost like these archetypal forces were clashing in history. It's just it's in hindsight, just looking at the origins of those two psychologists, it's just absolutely fascinating. Nolan, did you figure out what happened to the videos with Dr. Mays? It seems to be working now. Yeah, Nolan, the Dr. Mays video is back up. For some reason, YouTube took it down temporarily. But now my video with Dr. Clifford Mays is back up and working. So if you go into our videos, you can see that. Anybody who wants to see Dr. Clifford Mays, he's a pretty highly touted academic scholar and Jungian. He's a Jungian scholar, and he's an academic psychologist, or excuse me, an educational psychologist. He's incredibly insightful. He's an encyclopedia of knowledge. We had some audio problems and video problems because his internet was slow. You can hear everything fine, but sometimes it chops up and it's like a little bit frustrating every so often. But you can make out everything he's saying. And if you're interested in getting a history of psychology a history of education, and as well as of analysis of psychology, speaking of Jung and Freud, he gets into that. He talks about Karl Marx, and he even gets into what are the good things about Karl Marx. As Peterson fans, we're so used to hearing the bad things about Marxism, but he kind of points out some of the interesting observations that Marx made that are worth exploring a little bit. And he's by no means a Marxist, but he does at least acknowledge some of the points that Marx made, which I thought was interesting. And he talks about the issues and the corruption of the education system and how it commodifies the child and turns them into an object instead of an individual human being. So it's just an interesting perspective. You might get something out of it. You might agree with it. You might disagree with it. But okay, Giles Cockrell says, thanks, brother. I appreciate that, man. Just coming off pot, smoking since 16. Self-help is only taking me so far, and 12-step thing would be awesome. Yeah, and I think 12 steps is great for if you're trying to quit smoking weed and you feel like you can't. You know, a lot of people say weed's not addictive, but the thing about addiction is it's so subjective. Addictive people who are predisposed to being addicted in this, and now we have to at least concede that genetics does play a role in this. And there's more and more evidence coming out suggesting that addictive compulsive personalities have a genetic component. And if we can at least concede that, then we can say, okay, so if that's the case, then you can essentially, if you have that addictive compulsive gene or polygenic formation within you, you can essentially get addicted to anything. You get addicted to running marathons. You can get addicted to pornography. You can get addicted to eating. You know, you could get addicted to marijuana. So getting into a program of recovery and learning how to harness that energy within yourself so that it doesn't have control over you is an extremely important thing to say. So don't listen to the people who laugh when you say I was addicted to marijuana. That's ridiculous. Nobody gets to decide what your life looks like or what's addictive and what's not. That's condescending. And that's actually one of the things that bothers me. I love Joe Rogan's podcast, but it bothers me when he says, you can't be addicted to marijuana, or he acts like he's been coming around lately because he's been acknowledging that it's really not good for some people, but he used to be more stout in his defense. So, but yeah, I mean, by and large, I think it's a huge misconception that addiction only looks a certain way and that it's, yeah. Anyways, so do your thing, man. Really go do the 12 steps. It'll help you grow. The 12-step programs are very in alignment with Dr. Peterson's teachings. They teach you how to let go of resentment. They teach you how to take responsibility for your life. They teach you how to go make things right, make amends to people, how to acknowledge your weaknesses and focus on your strengths, how to make contact with a power greater than yourself, how to pray and meditate. I mean, it's just a really wholesome project. And if you're into Peterson's work, then the 12-step programs are just right in alignment with that. And there's a lot of misconceptions about what they are, and there's a lot of dogma and stuff like that. But if you can really get to the core of the beauty of the teachings, you're going to be in really good hands. So highly recommended, my friend. Let's see what else is going on here. Potatoes here, my favorite troll. I don't want to live with Ryan. I prefer to continue alone in my own apartment. I don't understand what you mean, Potato. Did I suggest that you should live with me? Potato is an old friend that dates back now a few weeks, writes into the chat. Always interesting with Potato. Griswald Grim says, every addict should learn the etymology of the word. If you don't mind posting the etymology of the word addict, that would be fantastic if you have a free hand. If not, that's totally okay. So let's see here. Any other questions? Write them in quick, because God forbid I have to come up with something on my own. That would just be existentially horrifying. So let's see here. We'll see if there's any other comments. Anyways, I was saying I saw Avengers last night, Endgame, good movie. I'm just going to go out on a limb here. I'm not a huge fan of the Captain Marvel. I don't like the way that it's being politicized, but that's neither here nor there. I just don't like things that are trying to make a point that seems inauthentic. Like when it's like a forced point, it's like we're forcing this point onto you. But I do feel it's kind of like what Jordan Peterson says about a good story. Like a good artist, a good piece of art, you just make the art, and then like it makes its own statement in of itself. And the conscious mind of the artist isn't like trying to force a statement into the art. And that's what makes good art. And so like as an audience member, when someone's trying to force something into an art piece, I can feel it, and it doesn't feel good to me, regardless of the altruism or the viability of this statement that they're trying to make. So I think that that's just something that bothers me. I'm not making an ideological statement, or I'm not taking a stand on any political subject in particular, but that bugged me a little bit. But one thing I noticed is I think it's interesting in Hollywood what our culture is putting out there in as far as symbolism goes. And if you think of like this Captain Marvel figure as a symbol for something, culturally speaking, and I don't know how much I want to say about that, like it's creating a god out of something. I'll just say that much. And I thought a lot about that. Like it's creating a god out of something. And the interesting thing is it's also defaming another god, Thor. So it's undermining Thor and then raising up another god. And Thor, I'm going to stop because I'm getting into spoilers here, and that was not cool. Sorry, I didn't even think of that. Sorry, guys. You should just totally. I should probably take this live stream down right now. You can't go that far into the movie. Damn, I can't believe I didn't think of it. I literally, I never talk about movies or TV shows, so I'm not used to like people listening to what I think about it, and so I guess I didn't even think that maybe I was just getting into spoilers. Oh my god, that's horrible. I think I need to. This live stream's definitely gonna have to come down now. I think because you can't do that to people. And anybody who's here listening already, I'm very sorry. Okay, Griswald Grim says that wasn't that bad of a spoiler. Well, do you think I should take it down? Because it's a little bit of a spoiler. Giles says, all love, bro. Thanks, man. I'll let you know how I go if I catch a live stream again. That would be fantastic. I'd really like to hear how things go. Richard Decatur says, your voice is fine. Thank you. Griswold Grim says, are you familiar with Edward Bernays? I'm not familiar. I have no idea who that is. But everybody tell me, do you think that spoiler was too much? Do I need to take this live stream down? I would hate to ruin anybody's experience of the movie. I hope I didn't ruin yours, because I would feel horrible about that if that was the case. Wow, that's a good learning experience, though. You got a big responsibility when you're on live. You can't be spoiling one of the most anticipated movies of the year. That's a big no-no. Oh, plane flying overhead. That's the price of being outside doing a live stream. So, boom, boom. All right, I'm going to wait for this plane to pass. Sorry, everyone. It's really loud. Okay, so still waiting on someone to tell me if I spoiled them too much, but I'll take it on Griswold Grim's word for now that I didn't do too bad of a number on you. But I was about to just tell you the whole thing, and I was like, what am I doing? Anyways, what a beautiful day. Very sunny here. It's about 65 degrees, and the wind is blowing just slightly. It's a nice, cool, caressing breeze, in case anybody was wondering how it felt to be in this seat right now. If there's any more questions, ask them now, because I'm starting to wonder if it's time to log off. Griswald Grim says Bernays is Freud's nephew, probably responsible for more of our society's problem. He got women smoking with liberty torches. Okay, I'll look that up. That's fascinating. I'm always impressed and positively surprised by the amount of knowledge that our listeners have. Another thing that Peterson says is people are not as dumb as TV, mainstream television, and news makes you think, right? Like they make it seem like everyone has this short attention span and they can't think critically, and we have to think for them. But one of the things I love about the community that we're all a part of, and this Sorting Myself Out channel, is well, that you guys are typically very intelligent, and not just in one way, but many different types of intelligence and creativity, and you contribute things that are always fascinating and surprising and genuinely thoughtful. So Dick Justice says, I don't think it was that bad, but I haven't seen the movie yet. Yeah, well, I'm glad you guys don't think it's that bad. So I appreciate the feedback here. What is the source of your ambition? Griswold Grim says. It's weird. It's like an instinct that I can't shake. It's like it almost feels as if there's a driving force inside of me that keeps me going regardless of if I want it to or not. Like it's kind of like almost like this automatic thing that like wants to express itself. It feels like it must express itself. And sometimes I listen to that voice more than others. And I think part of that I got from my dad, because you know how Peterson talks about the guy who will chop down a tree even if just because there's nothing else to do. He'll pick up an axe and chop down a tree if you put him in the middle of nowhere. That's kind of like my dad, or at least how he was a lot in the past. I mean, he's calmed down now since he's older, but yeah, I have a little bit of that in me. So there's part of that is that, but the other part that I think is more a product of my free will is that I have a vision. Like I feel like I have a calling that is connected to something bigger than myself. And that calling is both a responsibility to the product of that vision and also a inspiration that keeps me going. So if I feel like in the way of what I'm committed to of psychology and working with other people and Sorting Myself Out and continuing to develop my education, I feel like I'm being asked to do something, even if it's like being asked by a part of myself and it's nothing out there like some spirit or something, right? I have no idea. But what I'm saying is, even if it's just a part of myself is asking me to do something, I feel that calling so strongly. And I think it started when I used to started meditating and made contact with these different parts of myself and started realizing my potential. And then like these, they talk about the still small quiet voice. Like there's this still small quiet voice of my soul that like whispered these things, that potentials that I could do, like a difference that I can make. And that feels louder and louder now in my life. And it used to be really quiet, like I could barely hear it. And I guess if anybody out there is trying to find what their calling is, practice getting quiet and listening to that still small quiet voice and seeing what it has to say to you, because I think everybody has a calling. It's just a matter of not if you could clean the earwax out of your ears and hear it, to use a kind of a corny analogy. But if you can get quiet enough to listen to I think there's a poem that says, listen to the other voices. I've come to listen to the other voices. It might be a Mary Oliver poem or something. If you can listen to the other voices of yourself speak, then those voices might have something to say to you that is incredibly insightful, and that actually might change your life. Hey, Mercury. Good to see you, brother. Let's see here. Ash B says, if you're interested in Bernays, you should check out the documentary Century of the Self by Adam Curtis. Cool. I think Nolan says, I think if you make a note of the spoiler in the description, it'll be fine. I haven't seen it yet, so I'm not sure if it's big. Yeah, I don't know. I can't decide how much of a crime I committed today. It's a crime against humanity in some ways. Griswald Grim says, all the voices in my head sound like me. They're clever that way. And he also say, do you remember when you were called? So yeah, I first felt a calling as a kid. Like I could feel a little bit of a calling, but it was vague. Like it was just like a calling to do something, or a calling for stepping into something fun and creative, and like there's this limitless potential of being like an 8-year-old, right? Like I remember feeling that. And then the calling really set in when I was about 16, and I was at a deep crisis in my life, and I had been sent away from home, and I was in an isolated environment with about 40 other dudes on this dude ranch, very strict rules, and I was miserable. Like I hated myself. I remember looking in the mirror and saying, I hate you. I felt contempt for myself. I felt deep contempt for myself, and deep shame and deep insecurity. And then eventually something clicked inside of me, and I decided that I was valuable and worth living for. And I actually liked myself. Like I loved myself enough to try. And so I started meditating. I read The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. I read Anger by Thich Nhat Hanh. And he taught me how to hold my anger like a baby, is what he calls it. Hold your anger like a baby. And he has all these interesting, and I learned how to manage my temper, because I was a very hothead. I was the type of kid that would just like fucking freak out if they just start yelling or getting extremely angry about something. And so I started learning how to breathe and manage my anger. And then I started feeling like a leader. Because people started asking me for advice and started wanting me to listen to their problems and started wanting me to help them. And I started thinking like, well, maybe like this is what I'm meant to do. Maybe I'm meant to use this pain that I've experienced and turn it into something beautiful that can be useful. And so that's what I attempted to start doing. And then I took a huge interest in philosophy, psychology, spirituality. I went to Naropa University, which is a liberal arts college, and I did this training with the Earth-Based Institute, which is this really in-depth training on, well, it's called nature-connected coaching, but it's really a form of transformational counseling, life coaching, facilitation. And I learned like the science of transformation. I studied with these real experts, people like Dr. Strachan, Michael Jaspe, Rob Meltzer. Like there's all these names I could rattle off, these experts in the field, really. And I learned that there is such a thing as the science of transformation, and right down to the level of our brain and our neuroanatomy, and then all the way up to the level of spiritual possibilities. And I became extra passionate about it, and I just threw myself into it. Like I dug my heels in, and I just studied that hard. And I started working with clients. And the more I did that, the more the calling exposed itself to me. It's kind of like in Avatar, when on the movie, there's those plants that close up if you're too disturbing. Like when you walk past them, they close up. That's kind of like the calling, like you have to be sensitive enough to like actually like see it as this flower that will close up if you're too rough with it. And if you can kind of sneak up on it gently, it won't close up. It'll open up more to you. And then you'll have intimations of what's true or possible for you. And you won't be able to necessarily explain it logically, but you'll feel it on a deep and visceral level. And you'll know it to be true because you can feel it in your body and in your energy experience. And those are the callings, the deeper callings of life. And some people live their whole lifetimes without listening to those callings. They might have had experiences where they felt that calling, but they turned away from it. They ignored it. And they denied it. They suppressed it. And then every so often you'll have the lives of people who tried to listen to it and did their best to do that. And that's what I'm attempting to do, clumsily and sloppily and sometimes carelessly, but I'm stumbling forward in the right direction as of now. So let's see what else is going on in the chat here. Boom. Okay. Yeah, well, I feel like that's kind of a good note to end it on. Anyways, I guess I'll put a warning in the description that there's a mild spoiler in the middle of this that might spoil the Avengers Endgame just a little bit. Not a lot, but just like really mild, I think, but enough to bias you. So I would say sorry. I'm sorry about that. Big mistake. Live and learn. Didn't think about it. Hope that nobody's too mad at me about that. Dick Justice says, damn, dude, that's really inspirational. I'm hoping to find a way back to that path. Yeah, that's fantastic. And you can always find your way back to the path. It's never too late as long as you want to. And sometimes I have to find my way back to that path multiple times a day. You know, if I lose trust in myself or if I get distracted and I feel like I'm taking the path of resentment or bitterness or self-doubt, and then I remember I can come back to this centerpiece within my psyche that's guiding a deeper process in my life. All right, blessings to you all. I'm very grateful to be a part of this with you, and I'm just honored that you're here. And I hope you have a wonderful Saturday. Bye.